will be joining you today.
Warren. We've got Brian Juge in here running around helping us out.
Yeah.
Are we recording?
We are.
Good. All righty. Awesome.
So everything is ready to go?
I think everything's ready to go. And always the
housekeeping slide here.
The housekeeping slide.
Sorry, we're a little bit
everything
disjointed sounding right now. Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah, there are the real pictures. Oh, yeah. I always liked that one. You know, I saw a set of stairs. Somebody sent me pictures of stairs that are painted, and they had Salvador Dali's face going up a set of stairs, and I thought that would be so disorienting to walk up on. Anyway, before we get into talking about our topics, our housekeeping slides.
Yep. So sorry we're sounding a little disjointed. We'll get into it pretty quick, get into a rhythm. Anyway, the housekeeping slides, most of you have been on a go-to meeting before. If you want to minimize the console, you hit the orange and white arrow. If I'm saying this and you're not hearing me, it doesn't do much good to tell you to hit your mic and speaker or telephone button depending on the device you're using. You see the raise your hand button. Could each of you try and raise your hand so we can see if you're hearing us or if you're alive? Yes, you are hearing us, and we're kind of embarrassed with all the crazy things we were saying a minute ago.
Well, we got a handful of people raising their hands.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry. I see Terry's on the call.
One of the most important thing, if you do have questions, please feel free to type them in the question box, and we will try to get them answered as close to in context as we can for you.
Hey, Phil is on the call. Hey, it's like Old Home Week on the call here.
It is.
Yeah, we will try to answer all questions. I do have a lot of cool stuff to talk about, a lot of interesting things that we get constant questions about. Printing, plotting, my line types aren't working, the colors aren't working right. So if you all do have any questions as we're going through here, feel free to type them in the question box. Stan will read them off to me. We will try to get them answered. If we have to put them off, we may contact you on the side, or who knows, have a whole nother webinar that just talks about plotting and issues and line types. Look at that.
Now,
Sensei is on.
Let me ask real quick here. We just built a new webinar studio here, and can everybody hear? Is there any real echo or any problem with the sound right now? Just say yes, no, we're good.
Just one or two people. If it sounds good, just say it sounds good.
Okay, good.
Okay, cool. We're getting some sounds good. Groovy. Thank you very much for that. And let me get back into my slides and my presentations. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? Well, if you signed up for the webinar, then you've already read this. So you've done your AutoCAD drawing. And it doesn't matter whether you're using AutoCAD, AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD LT, Civil 3D, any of those. I'm not going to speak for Revit. Revit does not work this way. But if you're using an AutoCAD-based product, once you're done, most of the time, I'm not saying all of the time, but most of the time, you need to get your design, your intent, your vision on a piece of paper. So you go ahead and you've spent all this money on a great big computer and more money on software and God knows how much money on a printing device or a plotter, and you hit print, and it doesn't come out. It doesn't come out at all, or it doesn't come out looking good or the way that you want.
Yeah, we had Salvador on there earlier, and your printing and plotting comes out looking like a Jackson Pollock. We just don't want that.
Yeah, we don't want that. We don't want anything looking like a Jackson Pollock. No way. But we've got a lot of questions that have come up over the years. You know, a lot of people call in for tech support. And inevitably, whenever I teach an AutoCAD Advanced class, the majority of people are there, and I ask them, why are you here for the AutoCAD Advanced? And almost everybody says, well, I need to learn how to print and set up color tables. And so we could just have a printing and color table class, I think, and we may actually do that at some point. But I'm going to hit on some of the high points for you all today. Another issue that I've seen pop up, and I'm going to try to address this, is you're working and you're doing design, but you're working with other consultants who are using AutoCAD, and they've got their own standards and their own colors and line types and things, and then you go to print, and whatever you print, it comes out of their drawings does not look right. So how do you deal with that? Okay, so now, what all are we talking about? Well, I'm talking about, to start with, plot styles, tables that tell AutoCAD how you want your drawings to print. Also, we're going to talk about line type issues. Even though I've got the tables that tell AutoCAD how I want it to print, sometimes my line types don't look good or don't look right. And then some of the newer features and the latest versions of AutoCAD viewports and viewport overrides. So these are the main topics that we're going to be talking about. However, prior to do that, I am going to ask everybody to answer a question or two. So first question, because I like to know who I'm talking to, who all is out there, and what kind of software that you're using. So question number one, which version of Autodesk software are you using? 15, 14, 13, 12. Notice my last option in there, unsupported earlier version. Please keep in mind that even if you are on subscription, the only supported versions, and we always say supported, are the last 3 versions, so 15 of the last 3 versions. Anything earlier than that is technically not supported. Now that doesn't mean that if you call in, Denny isn't going to help you, and she will, and she's really, really good about helping people. So I'm going to give you all a couple more seconds.
Unfortunately, Autodesk does not support that software any longer.
Yeah, so if you do call in with problems or questions, we can usually get the issues resolved, but if it has to do with something that may need a programmetric fix, there's nothing we can do for that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
It's interesting to see how many people have moved to the 2015.
Now this is the most interesting number I think I've seen, is that 39% up at the top. So that's actually pretty cool. So a lot of people are really jumping on top of the latest version, and that's good to know. Okay, so except for the 39%, I'm going to go ahead and hide that. So except for the 39%, for those of you who are not using Release 2015, why haven't you upgraded? We really need to know this because, again, we need to know who we're talking to, but also what kinds of issues and problems that you're having, what kind of situations that you're running into out there in the field. Everybody's clicking and picking, and unfortunately you can only pick on one at the time. Maybe I should have allowed everybody to pick on more than one.
One of the things that I'm going to mention while we're on this, because believe me, we really aren't trying to twist your arm to get you to upgrade. We're not the biggest fans of this kind of, I hate to use the word forced because I don't want to be unfair to Autodesk, but
it's being recorded, Stan. Watch out.
Yeah, but the Autodesk move to mandatorily have everybody on the current version doesn't mean your old software won't work or whatever, but you should be on the current version by February 1st of next year. If you want to stay current, you need to be current version, current subscription. That's the only way in the future you'll be able to get, stay current on your software.
Now, but what Stan means about that is that you have to own a license of the current version. That doesn't mean that you can't install an earlier version or keep the old versions installed. Because as I'm looking at here, we've got a lot of people who are actually on the latest version, but a lot of people who aren't. Most of the people are saying you only upgrade every couple of years, but by the sound of that, since you didn't check that you let your subscription drop, as long as your subscription is up to date, you can go ahead and install one of those earlier versions. That's not an issue right there. But we do have to stress, don't let your subscription drop, because when that happens, you're locked into that license. As of February 1st, you will not be able to upgrade your software anymore. So for those of you on subscription, you're good to go. If you're not on subscription, you've got to watch out about that. Otherwise, you're going to be locked into that version. When you go to try to upgrade, they're going to say, nope, you can't. You've got to buy a whole new seat of software, and that's bloody expensive, let me tell you.
So, so just keep that in mind for the next few months.
All right, now something a little bit more topical. Something a bit more topical. I really need the answer to this question, because I need to know how much in the color tables and the plot style tables that I need to address. And I'm hoping that was only one person who checked that button. Oh, somebody else is checking it, so we'll see. 70% of you. Come on, I need everybody to answer this question.
That's amazing.
That's
There's still a couple of those babies out there.
Yeah, and I should have put on there, if you're using a pen plotter, why, and I know the answer to that is because you can't kill them. You could take one of those out and use it as a boat anchor over the weekend and shake the water out, and that puppy would still print true as day. Okay, everybody voted. We've got about 88%. Those of you who are falling asleep or have logged off, last chance, 3 seconds. 2, 1. Okay, I'm closing the polling. And as expected, the vast majority of you are using something other than a pen plotter, but you'll see there that we do have 9% of the respondents, handful of people who might still be using a pen plotter. So I will show one or two tips or tricks about using pen plotters when we get into color tables, because that can really cause a bit of an issue. All right, everybody, let's get into what I'm talking about here. Okay, first of all, first thing I do want to discuss, color tables. The vast majority of AutoCAD users, we've been using AutoCAD for quite some time. We're used to a coloring system in AutoCAD. You've got red lines, you've got yellow lines, you've got green lines on a black background. And since we're used to a coloring system, that's how we want to print. We want to say, take the red lines and I want to print them bold, and take the green lines and I want to print them faded and thin, that kind of thing. By doing this, what I'm describing is I'm describing a color table approach. When we print out of AutoCAD, Alt-Tab, there we are. When we print out of AutoCAD and I get a drawing open, and we just open a file here. So I've got my drawing, I'm ready to go, I can see my colors. Now I want to plot. All right, there are several different ways of handling how the colors are printed, your line weights and all of that. And I'm not going to talk about adding in line weights through layers or anything else. For the most part, really, the most efficient way of working is through a color table. And I forgot to get my little John Madden pointer on here, so hang on a sec. Let me get that rolling. And by color table, when you come into the plot dialog box, your color tables, or what's called your plot style table, is assigned to the drawing. Now, you can assign a plot style table on a layout by layout basis, which is really nice. But the plot style table controls how your drawing is printed. Plot style table controls things like pen widths, screening, color overrides, etc. So what is a color table? When you assign a plot style table, you'll use a drop-down list, and I'll show you where these are stored in a moment, and whoever's going to be editing them and building them. And AutoCAD or Autodesk gives you a handful that come prepackaged with the AutoCAD applications, and you can use these as kind of a roadmap. First thing I'm going to say before I even get into editing a plot style table and talking about what color tables are is Autodesk gives you a handful of pre-built color tables to go by. This is good and bad. Here's the good. Use one of these as a roadmap for doing it what you want it to do. As an example, if I want to print everything in black and white, I want to start with this one called monochrome. Okay, now here's the bad. Don't ever set one of these up as your company standard. Why? Because if you do, then somebody else is going to, and they're not going to rename those. So if you do decide to set one up as your standard, or you want to use one, you're going to find out where they're at in a few moments, and you're going to rename it. Put your company name there. Put a prefix, a suffix. Put anything you possibly can there. Just don't keep it the same name and use the ones that come right out of the box. That's the same kind of stuff that everybody else might be using, or somebody else. And if they send you their drawing and they send you their color table, you're liable to overwrite files with same name issues. Okay? So, I like that. I just saw the one question. What's a pen plotter? Chris, be very, very happy that you don't know what a pen plotter is. Okay. So what is a color table? What is a pen style table or plot style table? It is a table that tells AutoCAD how I want to print my drawing. First set series that I'm going to be talking about here are what are called color tables. What a color table does is it takes all of AutoCAD's logical colors, 256 colors, and it assigns them a method of printing in your plotting device. I have got all of my AutoCAD colors, color number 1 through, 255. Color number 255 of the logical colors, I can specify one or more by using Shift or Control inside here, and I tell AutoCAD how I want it to print. Okay? Pretty straightforward. The things that are important inside your color table, though. Do I want to override the color? Do I want to make my red lines print yellow and my yellow lines print green? Now, why on earth would anybody want to do that? Well, here's why. Here's a quick and easy reason. I don't want a color print. I want everything to print black. So I've got an instant monochrome print. Another example was when I was working in engineering and the surveyors wanted to go out and stake something, we would print everything black except for whatever layer that they were working on. And each one of our stakeout layers were different colors. green for sanitary and red for, or yellow for gas or something like that. So we would take that particular color, that particular layer, we would print it bright red to keep them focused. So you're talking about color override. So that's the first reason, do a color override. Second reason you want to get in here is the screening value. If I do want black, maybe I want some things in a light gray or a faded back shade of black. Back to black. No, anyway, maybe there's a joke in there somewhere. So I would use the screening values, and I could set the screening on here. 100 gives you full intensity. You can set your screening to 0, and that basically is going to not use any ink. Which is a great practical joke to play on somebody, by the way. Set all their screening values to 0. Don't do that. But it's a funny practical joke. So you can use different shades of gray inside here if you're doing a monochrome print. Now you're going to see inside here, do I want to adjust the line types? You can actually adjust the line types on a color-by-color basis. I can take my red lines and make them print out dashed for whatever reason. I'm not a big proponent of this, but if you're having issues with line types, this may be a good answer. I'm going to show you a better answer. If you do decide, for whatever reason, that you want to change the line types, you do want to turn on that adaptive value, that adaptive scaling value, and that will help scale your line types on your plot-by-plot size basis. Okay, so what are the important ones so far? Color and screening. Another important one, line weights. Okay, which line weight do you want that color to use? Like I said, I want my red lines to print out bold and red, and I got all these different line weights. You'll notice that if the line weights aren't available, I can come down here and edit my AutoCAD line weights and plug them in. Notice that I've got edit line weights, but I do not have an add button. Well, I don't need an add button. I've got a free one right there, 0. Okay, I don't need that. A couple of these are so bloody thin that, you know, seriously, you can actually edit these or adjust them, but you can't necessarily add any line weights in here. Okay? Everything that I'm doing here, though, gets stored inside the computer and inside my color table, so please be aware of that. All right, now if I'm using a drawing that's got really, really thick lines and I want to adjust how those lines end or how those lines join up, like do I want it a nice rounded corner, I can do that. But typically, these guys right here are only for very, very thick lines, thick line types. And also, for very, very thick lines, do I actually want to fill the line with a solid hatch pattern, or do I want to use something kind of different and cool for a fill style for my thick lines? So getting back to it, which ones are the important ones? Number 1, color override. Number 2, screening. Number 3, line weight. Those are the real important ones for those of you that have an inkjet or laser jet system. Now, there were a few of you that did mention that you are using pen plotters, where it picks up a pen and it actually starts drawing with it. In a situation like that, some of these aren't going to be able to do you any good. So your colors are going to have to be assigned based on carousel pens. For those of you with the pen plotters, you don't want to deal with the carousel pen colors. What you want to do is you want to use this right here. Which pen number do you want it to pick up? When you say, okay, colors 1, 2, and 3, which pen number do I want it to pick up? That's the pen number. Another thing, for the lightweight pens, or where I would use screening, you may want to use a grayscaling and or a dithering option for those of you with pen plotters, and this will help the plotter actually generate the line types, or generate the line weights and generate the thicknesses, the screening values that you may want. Alternatively, you can go call HP and get rid of the pen plotter and go buy yourself a laser jet printer or something else. But for those of you using pen printers, these are the options that are going to be important to you. Things like the line weight doesn't make a hill of beans difference. The color doesn't make any difference. It's which pen number are you telling it to pick up out of the carousel. Now you'll notice up here we've got 3 tabs. General is just where I'm going to rename it or something. The table view, I can take it a 1 color by 1 color basis. Not a great option. The table view, 1 color by 1 color basis. So typically when we're in color tables, I'm working on the form view. I'm telling the program I want to take these colors and print them this way. And I want to take that color and maybe that color, and I want to print them a different way. More information can always be found inside the help system. It's really handy. But when I get done and I save and close this, it's going to get stored wherever I tell it to store. And I'll show you where those are in a minute. How many of these can I have? Unlimited number of color tables. in. There we go. Okay, so color tables, CTB files. What are they? They're a plot style table that adjusts things on a color by color basis. Oh yeah, and I did mention something a couple times. I was mentioning that the program's going to be using your logical colors. So when you're setting the color of a layer, we're talking logical colors, or what Autodesk calls your index colors. This is something else that I have to stress to everybody that I run into all the time. I'm using a color table. I'm using a color table system. And I set my colors and it's still printing in color even though I told it to print in black. How come? Not these. Not the true color ones or the color books, which actually use a variance of true color. If you use a true color inside of one of your layers, then AutoCAD's going to print it whatever color you pick out of this. AutoCAD is actually mapping these 255 colors to different pens or different options. True color, it doesn't map those whatsoever. So the rule here is that if you want to use a color table or a system, you're going to stay away from true color. If I want to print a rendering or something like that, or some kind of nice little background color or background palette, some of the neat little gradient hatch patterns, I'm going to use true color. But for everything else, you've got to use the index colors. Back to my, back into the PowerPoint. Okay, so color tables, look at the color of the object. The object, not necessarily the layer. Hopefully you are all using color by layer, but sometimes we need to override a color on an object by object basis, and it's going to change the plot settings based on that color by color basis. So the next thing to talk about, the named styles, or what are called the STB files. I know that sounds pretty horrible. STB files. I got an STB. What do I do with it? You go to a doctor, huh? I don't know. The STB files. What happens when you get a drawing in and it's using an STB file, and how do I deal with it? What is an STB file? Is another question we get all the time. Okay, what is an STB? It kind of takes it in reverse and it ignores colors. With an STB file, which I'll show you here in a moment, you override the plot settings on an object by object or layer by layer basis. And at no time did I mention color. Basically, I'm going to build a style and I'm going to call it thick pen, and another style called thin pen, and another style called medium pen shaded 50%. And I'm going to apply these styles on an object by object or layer by layer basis. Now keep in mind that when I'm talking about object by object basis, you can apply a plot style to an entity, in a line, a polyline, a circle inside of AutoCAD by using the property windows. You cannot do this on Civil 3D objects. For Civil 3D objects, you've got to get into the layers or into the styles, okay? So those of you who are using, or anybody out there using AutoCAD architecture with intelligent objects, the object by object basis won't work. Okay, so I'm back inside my normal printing drawing, which I'll come back to here in a moment, but I want to talk about the named plot styles. This can be a really interesting system if you get it to work, because it kind of simplifies things on how AutoCAD works. I don't have to worry about how many layers I've got and what colors I'm using on this layer, and am I using the right colors. Honestly, as long as I'm using an AutoCAD drawing, I can have, not that I would ever do this, mind you, but I can have everything on one layer and everything with one color, and everything on my drawing prints differently. So how does this work? Well, when I go to print this drawing, I apply a style table. Just like I applied a moment ago the color table, I'm going to apply an STB type table. Now you're going to notice when I got into this drawing and I pulled this list down, this is not the same list you saw a moment ago. So how does AutoCAD know which and when? Well, when you start a blank brand new drawing by using a template, file new, AutoCAD has whether or not you're using the named plot styles as a separate template. That's information that's embedded in the drawing. And it's embedded in the drawing on a drawing by drawing basis. That information is whether or not I'm using a color table scheme or a named table scheme. You can only use one or the other. You can only use one or the other. You can't use both. You can switch back and forth between the two, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but you can only use one or the other. so that when I'm back in that Edition A drawing, and I go to print my drawing, you'll notice that I've only got my color tape, my CTB files that are built inside here, not the STB files. When I get back into this guy right here and I go to print, you'll notice that I've only got those STBs. So I can only apply one or the other. Now, one thing to always remember, regardless of the system that you're using, the color tables or the named tables, AutoCAD allows you to assign a color table on a layout by layout basis. It would be really nice if we could assign them on a viewport by viewport basis, but they never got that working. I'm going to show you how to fiddle around with that and change it. But it's always on a layout by layout basis. So when I come into this layout and I'm going to print, I've got to assign the table that I want to use for this particular layout. I can change my mind at any time in the future, but I've got to assign it as soon as I'm going to print.
Warren, before we get too far away from Taylor's question here, take a gulp of water and a breather, and I'll read this.
Okay.
We have a couple of different color tables and would like to make a simple printout that illustrates the variations in the weights and screening for the various colors. Can you recommend a way to do this?
Unfortunately, not a great way, because, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Stan, because I just mentioned your limitation right there, is you can only assign a table, regardless of the type of table that you're using, you can only assign it on a layout by layout basis. So really what you want to do is you want to have your line work, like you'll see a lot of CAD standards will have a drawing with a bunch of lines and the colors and how they print, etc. But you'll want to do this on a couple of different layouts and assign each layout that appropriate color table. And then print it and put the header on it and say color table A, and this is how your line work is going to look, and then another drawing right behind it, color table B, and how your drawing is going to look. You can't put it both on one drawing or all three of them or four of them on one drawing, but you set up a handful of little 8.5 by 11 sheets with the line work on there, and you show the before and after colors. Here's the colors that we're going to be using, and here's how they're going to print, and then you're just doing a little bit of copying and pasting. That's the best way to do that. Whoa. Every time I answer this question, don't show me this message again, it keeps asking me that question. Don't show me that message. Okay, so getting back to my named system here, and notice I've got a couple of layouts inside here, and this one I've called monochrome. So that when I go to print this one, I want this one to print monochrome, so I'm going to assign it that monochrome table, and that when I preview it, okay, nothing actually happened. So how come? And that's one of the questions that I get all the time. So one thing, did you say that you did want to plot with the plot styles? A lot of times people will leave that unchecked. Or how else were you working on here? Okay, the monochrome STB, what is the program supposed to do? It's supposed to print everything black. But wait, remember what I said. In the color table, AutoCAD's taking all of these colors and it's printing it black. With a style table, you build your style black, and you have to apply your table on a layer-by-layer basis. So how would I wind up doing that? Okay, this is where things can get a little bit difficult. I'd have to go into my layers, and I'm going to have to apply the plot style on a layer-by-layer basis. Now, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself. But wait, Warren, what if I wanted this one to plot one way, and I wanted this one over here to plot another way? Then I apply the plot style on a layer-by-layer basis as a viewport override. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about those viewport overrides. So I'm going to be doing those viewport plot styles, and I set those up, and that's how you're going to be taking care of it. It's a viewport plot style. Now, what about this one right here? What if I wanted to plot that one different? I could do the same thing, and I've got the style table. This is where, when building a style table, you're going to tell the program, as you see here, I've got a handful of them in here. You're going to tell the program that I've built a handful of styles. Like, how do I want my objects to print? So at this point, I'm not thinking about how do I want this color to print. I'm thinking about how do I want my drawing to print. As if I were on a table drafting and I want to pick up a thick pen or a thin pen or a shaded or something else. So you'll see here I've got one style called existing conditions where I want it to print gray and use the object line weight. And proposed work, I want all my proposed work to print red and a thicker line weight. And my ground to print. So you see here, what I'm doing is I'm building how I want these objects to print, and then I'm building a table out of that so that after I've done this, when I go to print my drawing and I've applied that table, that's what I'm going to wind up seeing. At no point did I worry about colors. Okay, so what color is the layer? What I did was I said, I want my proposed work, and actually my proposed work is on 2 or 3 different layers, and those layers are 2 or 3 different colors. I don't care. I want my proposed work to print red, and I assign that table to either my objects or my layers. Okay, what about all my existing work? You'll notice here that I've got an existing property line or something else, and all these trees and some existing stuff, and I've got those printing with the existing pen. So in this type of situation, I've applied that plot style inside that layout, and I've applied those styles, those names, to either my objects or to my layers. How do you apply it to objects? Oh, real easy. Like I said, properties window. Okay, you'll notice that my plot style option right up here, I can apply a plot style to an object by object basis. So this is where things can get really flaky too, everybody. Is that, you know, we've had for years and years, I want all my colors to print certain ways, but in this instance, I want this object to print one way and another object on the same layer to print a different way. You can really get kind of in-depth in here. Come back to my monochrome print, and I want to change it, and I want to print it, and I'm looking at it, and there it goes. There's my monochrome print because I assigned the monochrome print style to all of those objects. And I said, just take everything and print them black. So in this instance, I don't have to, like I said, I don't have to worry about grabbing a bunch of colors or anything else. I'm just creating a table of how I want to see things on a sheet of paper. Okay, how do you want to see things on that sheet of paper? And then you're going to apply them on a layer by layer basis. Let me get back into my little reminders here. Okay, so color tables. Taking all of a specific color, and it only works for those logical colors, 255 colors. Name tables, style tables. I tell it how I want it to print and apply it to a layer by layer, object by object basis, or combination of the two, and colors of the layer are completely irrelevant. Where are these files, Warren? Where do they exist? Every time I go to print, I'm having to tell it where these files are. Or what if I get a drawing in from a consultant and they send me one of those CTBs or STBs? What do I do with it? Where are those files? Okay, quick, easy, down and dirty way of, I just got a drawing in. I just got the consultant's STB, and I want to print it. How do I do that? Fastest way to take care of it is in your application menu. You come down here where it says print, and you look down where it says manage plot styles. There they are. That's where my computer is looking for the plot styles. So without having to worry about changing your files tab of your options, which I'm going to show you, and getting into CAD management, getting into IT management, and finding out where it is, because, you know, I could have told you, well, it's in your login name. It's under C users, login name, app data, roaming, Autodesk, and I'm talking and talking, and you're phasing out. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about going and opening up Windows Explorer and going and trying to find something. AutoCAD knows exactly where it is. Application menu, print, manage plot styles, Bob's your uncle, there you are. And all you got to do is just drag and drop. When I pick that, by the way, this is Windows Explorer. So when I pick that, all you got to do is just open up the email that they sent you, open up Windows Explorer, drag and drop right into this location. What if I've got two that have the same name? Then stop naming things with the default names. Stop naming things. What if I have to rename something? Fine. Then you just right-click and you can rename the file. And when I come into my drawing and I go to print, it's going to say file not found, and I'll have to pick it out of the list again. But that's where they are. What if I've got 10 people in my office and we all want to share the same plot style? Man, you people are asking a lot of questions. I want to share the same. I'm having a conversation with myself. That's kind of scary. And you want to share the same plot files. What do? Okay, inside my AutoCAD options, in my files tab, I've got printer support file search path. And inside there, plot style table search path. Okay? So all I've got to do is take my plot styles off of somebody's computer, put them up on the server, and then come over to everybody's computer and point to that one location on the server. Then we're all using the same ones. Well, doesn't that mean that if somebody changes one, everybody's going to see the changes? Yes, and that's probably a good thing. Unless you're the CAD manager and you don't want everybody changing them, in which case you lock that directory and you give it user-level permissions, or you go around with a big oak stick and start beating on people for changing your files. But it's in the Files tab, and you tell everybody not to mess with it, go through the CAD management, but everybody gets to share all of your plot styles, all in one location. Pretty easy. That's where those files exist, and that's what they look like. Okay, so what are the plot settings that we're talking about, and what are the kinds of things that we can change? And actually, I should have put that up at the top of the list because I already went over that. So as you open up each one of those, as I mentioned, you can override the object's color, the line weight, the line type, etc.
It's called reinforcement.
Reinforcement. That's right.
Reinforcing the learning.
That's right. Can I change my mind? We have this all the time. I had a company that got into the named plot styles, and they started playing around with them. And one or two of the people in the company thought these were the best things since sliced bread. It made life really, really easy. And everybody else said, okay, but when I print, what color does this red print out? And they kept saying, well, I don't know. What layer is it on? I don't know what layer it's on. It's like 500 things. I just want to know what color this red is going to print out at. So basically, we were having a little bit of an issue between getting them migrated over to this whole named style system, and they were going a little bit crazy. Okay, so after about 10 months, the company decided named plot styles just aren't working for the mentality of our users. We need to switch back to color tables. And this was after we had done a whole bunch of projects and there were a bunch of drawings. So how do you fix it? Can you change your mind? Yes, you can. There is a command in AutoCAD.
chng.mnd.
MND. Wow, that's a blast. Blast from the past. Convert P styles. You notice how I didn't type in the whole thing? I love autocomplete and I love autocorrect inside of 2015 because I only type with 2 fingers. And I love that, by the way, the autocorrect. Con-E-R-T. Notice what I spelled and what AutoCAD's finding for me? I love autocorrect. That is just the coolest thing in the world. It says, okay, I know you type convert, but that's no such thing. So what about this? Okay, so anyway. So the command that you're looking for is this one right here, convert P styles. That's one that you're going to want to use. This will allow you to take a CTB file, CTB drawing, the drawing that's using CTBs, and change it to STBs. This is how they migrated all of their existing drawings so that they could use the color or the style table system. Just as one command. It'll all plot style names, everything gets changed over. You can also convert from the STB system back into the CTB system. Okay. Now, if you're using the color table system and you want to convert to a named style system, but you don't want to go through and have to reassign everything and do all of that, you've also got this command. It's called convert CTB. It'll take your current color table and convert it to a named style table, and all you got to do is go in and change the names from color 1, color 2, color 3 to thick, thin, back-shaded, or whatever. So if you've got a really cool color table, rather than reinventing the wheel and rebuilding a whole new style table, you use this command, and you can convert your existing color table over to a style table. Bob's your uncle, do a little bit of changing, and go play 9 holes of golf.
And with that, Joe asks, are the STB and CTB files stored together in the same folder?
Yes, sir, they are. So as I mentioned before, if you come down here in your application menu to print, and you look at where it says Manage Plot Styles, take a look at that list for a second. You're going to see my CTBs and you'll see my STBs. They're all in the same location. You cannot separate them out into 2 different locations. If you do, then you're having to wind up going and telling AutoCAD where to look one time to another. And so you want to plug all of these into one folder, one location, and don't use the same name. Seriously.
And yes, with that said, Bob is my uncle. And what happens if you have PCP files and want to change the CTB? parentheses, PC3. That comes in from Cornelius.
Okay, the plotter configuration, which you're talking about there, that's not your plot styles necessarily, but that might have to do with if you've got a pen table. Your PC3 files are your printer property files. If you want to take an old PCP file and turn it into a color table, that's where I could go down here and choose New for my color table, and I can import the settings from an old PCP or PC2 file. Now the actual plot settings, the driver settings, not the color table settings, but the driver settings, that's going to be something you're going to have to rework and build into your PC3 files. But what Autodesk did with those old PCP or PC2 files, I'll give you all an idea what I'm talking about here. A PCP file was not only the drivers, which plotting device am I sending it to, what type of driver am I using, what Heidi drivers, is it an HP driver, but it also had all of my color table information stored all inside one file. So many, many years ago, Autodesk split the two of them out. This is your PC3 information, which is your plotting device information, the drivers that you're using, the plotter that you're using, and then it took out the plot style or the color tables and it plugged it in up here. So it split it in half, and that's where both of them went. If I want to reuse an old PCP or PC2 file, I just go up here to New, and I say I want to use an old PCP or PC2 file. Good luck with that. If you get it to work properly and you don't have to do a lot of post-processing, then congratulations. I will be quite honest, of the times that I've tried to do this, I spent as much time post-processing what it imported as I would have spent if I had just come up here and said I want to create a new one and do it manually.
Okay, so we've got a few other questions here. Warren, Daniel asked, during the conversion, does it delete the other file or the other table?
It does not delete the table. So for the convert, for the convert P styles command, okay, it converts the color style to the drawing to using the name style table or vice versa. The tables are all safe and secured. Those are files. If I want to get rid of those files, I've got to go into Windows Explorer like you just saw a moment ago and manually delete those. It will not delete the files. However, what it has to do is it has to detach that file definition from the drawing. So if I've got a name style table and I'm using thick, thin, and shaded pens and I change it over to a color table, those definitions get removed from my drawing and it's just going to go color 1, color 2, color 3. Same thing happens in reverse. Okay?
Joe asks, what is the add a plot style wizard for? I would answer sending young women back to Kansas. That's kind of obscure. So.
Oh, that's a bad one. Okay, let me get back in. That's a bad one, Sam. Your add a plot style wizard is when you go to create a new plot style. This guy right here, I click new. This is the wizard. This is the add a plot style wizard. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that brings up some tech support that Denny's going to thank me for mentioning here in just a moment. So this is your wizard, basically. Now, let me talk about this. Glad he mentioned this. All right, a moment ago I mentioned, watch my screen, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. A moment ago I mentioned that if you want to grab your plot styles and put them up on the server, then you grab your files, put them up on the server, go to the printer support file search path, go to the plot style table, and change this. Okay? And that's exactly what I meant. You're going to come up here, you're going to use, come up here, you're going to go to Print, Manage Plot Styles, and you're going to grab all of the plot styles and move them up to the server. You are not, in any way, shape, or form, going to grab this wizard, which is a shortcut, and move this up to the server. Please do not move this shortcut to the server. This shortcut is referencing files on your C drive in your login name. So whenever anybody goes to access the plot files or the color tables, it's going to read the shortcut and it's going to try to find a location that is not on their computer because they don't log in with your name. And if they do, you got bigger problems than AutoCAD can fix. But anyway, every time they access
and license compliance will be contacting you soon.
Yeah, the license compliance will come down on you. Watch out. But every time you open up this folder or you go to use the drop down for the color tables, if AutoCAD finds this shortcut inside that folder, AutoCAD's going to attempt to read that shortcut and the location for it. So do not, last time, do not move this Add a Plot Style Table Wizard shortcut with your plot styles. Thank you for mentioning that.
A couple more here, and I know you have a few more things you want to show, so we'll try and keep it on track. And James asks, and this gets into the Revit world, maybe you know, Warren, is that how you use the PCP that you get when you export from Revit? So James, you're probably talking about you export a DXF from Revit. Is that what you're referencing there?
Don't.
And Warren honestly may not know, but we'll see if
I don't know what that PCP file is that comes out of Revit. That would be a good side question. Maybe I'd get Brian Juge involved.
Warren's a GIS guy, and in his world, everything's flat.
That's right. I don't do Revit. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, but what that PCP file is. It sounds right that it would be some kind of color table system, that if you export your Revit model as an AutoCAD drawing, it would do the same thing. I'm going to have to confirm that, and I'll get Brian Juge, our architect,
or
actually export me something, and I'll do some digging. So now that we've got that question, if you, at the end of the presentation, I'll show you the email to email into with information or additional questions, and then email us so I can have your information on hand and answer them.
And last question for right now, Mike asks you to define HIDE files.
No, I'm not going to. No, HIDE files, HDI files, are drivers that allow AutoCAD to connect to and to talk to hardware. So back in the old days, in order to connect to a printer and to talk to a printer, we had to use HIDE drivers in order to do that. These days, we don't have to do that. If you can see your printer in Windows in here, and hopefully everybody's been in here, if Windows can see it, AutoCAD can see it. Okay, so we don't worry about the HIDE drivers, the HDI drivers of connecting to objects anymore. We don't do that. Now, for those of you with pen plotters, that goes right off the table. You're going to still need to find your HIDE drivers, old pen plotter drivers, etc. But hopefully, if you're already plotting, you know how to take care of that. Okay, so I got one or two more things that I did want to make sure that we covered. Okay, so I did talk about if you want to change your mind and switch from color table to name table, you can. Name table to color table. If you're going from a color table into a name table, you can actually pull your old color table styles. You cannot do that in reverse. I can't take a named style table and apply it on a color by color basis. That's just impossible. Okay, so the last question that always pops up, I said this in the very beginning when we were talking about color tables. You can apply them on a layout by layout basis. So what if I've got lots of different viewports and I want the viewports to print differently? And I started to show this a little bit. What if I've got a drawing with a lot of different viewports of different scales, etc., and I want each viewport to print differently? Well, way back 100 years ago, when AutoCAD 2000 first came out, one of the things that people don't know is that they tried this. The technology never did work, so it got taken out and locked down. But you used to be able to take an individual plot style table, a color table, and apply it to a viewport by viewport basis. That didn't work, which is why this is not really there anymore, and the technology is kind of broken. So what do we wind up having to do? Many years later, what Autodesk wound up doing is they wound up saying, okay, if I open up my layout, if I open up my viewport inside my layout, I've got all of my viewport overrides. So if I'm using a color table and I know that my red is going to plot thick, and in this viewport I want all of my layers to plot thick, well, fine. In this viewport, I'm going to override all of my layers so that they will be red and that they will plot thick. Okay, what if I'm using a named plot style? How do I do that? Well, it's even easier. For a named plot style, as I showed you, I can override the plot style table on a viewport by viewport basis. This one's supposed to be using the normal one, and I told it to use the monochrome instead. So if you've got a drawing with multiple viewports and you want them to print differently, you just use the viewport overrides, color, etc. And you can do the same thing with line types. Another question that keeps popping up, people keep asking, all right, I'm going to plot this drawing. It's got multiple viewports. but the line types don't look good. The dash line type isn't looking good between all of my viewports. All right? The variables that everybody needs to memorize, the last thing I'll talk about in here, the variables. LT scale. Notice how I misspelled that again. I did that on purpose, really. I'm not typing with 3 fingers. Okay, LT scale. When you use a line type scale, that controls how all of your line types look throughout the drawing completely. I want to set this to 1, which means I'm printing my layout at a 1-to-1 scale. So I need to set my LT scale to 1. When I do that, I set my PS LT scale. My paper space, line type scaling, I'm going to set that to 1 as well. When I set that to 1, it's going to take each one of these differently scaled viewports and apply that scale factor for each one of my line types so that they all come out looking exactly the same. But wait, if I set my line type scale to 1 and I go into my model space, then all of my lines, and I'm zooming in and zooming in and all my lines, man, they're really, really tiny. I've got an 1/8 of an inch dash, and how do I fix that then? Okay, as of 2010, you have got MS LT scale. Third variable that a lot of people don't know is out there. MS LT scale. When you set MS LT scale to 1, that means your model space line types are going to scale appropriately according to your visibility scale. I changed that to something like 1/4 of an inch. I regen my drawing, and there you go. There's those line types, and they look good. Just got to remember to regen the drawing. So line type scale set to 1, PSLT scale set to 1, LT scale set to 1. Bob's your uncle. You set all of that right inside one template. You never have to worry about it again.
Excellent, Warren. Excellent. Mike's got a question here. Discuss issues with plotting in 2012 OEM.
I can't.
Well, I was going to say.
Unfortunately, I don't know the OEM version. To the best of my knowledge, though, the OEM version should not have any plotting capability crippling features inside of it. What version? 2012?
2012.
Okay, so that's after annotative scaling. So you've got all of the MSLT scale. You've got your color tables and everything else. To the best of my knowledge, you should not have any problems, issues, or not be able to do anything that I'm doing here. If that does seem to be the case, we might need to know what it is and see if it's a limitation of the OEM version. Unfortunately, we don't have applications here that use the OEM version, so we might need to hook up to your computer and take a quick peek at what's going on. But that's technology. It should not be crippled or limited whatsoever.
Just to let everybody know, Warren and I will be starting a CAD museum in our retirement on an exit ramp in Nebraska somewhere.
That would be fun.
Because we both remember so much crazy stuff.
Yep.
Joe asks, when you set up a sheet to plot using DFW6E plot.pc3,
yep.
How do you handle the print borders? On plotting machines, the printable area is less than the sheet size. Does the DWF6E plot to the edge of the paper?
The DWF6
Hopefully I read that right.
plotting PC3 basically will plot. It's a virtual printing device similar to a PDF, and all of that is hard-coded into the PC3 options. So if I'm looking at things like the standard printable area of that, I can come into my options for the PC3 and specify or modify a standard printable area. So if I've got an ANSI A8.5 by 11, I could come in here and modify those. All of those are hard-coded in, and remember that we can adjust all of those and build them into your PC3 file for all of your virtual devices. And I'm going to stress this. Virtual devices, a DWF and a PDF, are virtual printers. They're printing a file. Even what if you're printing a TIFF image or a BMP? Yes, you can do it there. Don't really mess with this unless you really, really know what you're doing and you want to spend a lot of time, money, and effort going back and forth. Don't mess with this with a hard device, because with hard devices, hard printers, this information is hard-coded into the actual device. In other words, if I've got an HP DesignJet 600 and I come in here and I set these numbers, my edges of my paper, to 0, that doesn't mean the HP 600 is actually going to be able to print to those all the way to the edges of the paper. So a lot of that information is hard-coded, and you need to look at your user's manual for those devices. But for the virtual devices, this is where you can change that information.
Warren, we have about 4 minutes left. We got a couple more questions. Do you have anything else you wanted to cover real quick?
All right. Questions, and I'm going to wrap it up.
Get the questions done. Steve asks, I've been having trouble with my blocks and line objects to plot not thin and faded. What am I missing?
Your blocks? The thing to watch out for in a block, and if a block or a symbol in AutoCAD is not printing the way that you think it should by putting it on an appropriate layer, the first thing to always take a look at is go into the block editor and make darn certain that these objects are on layer 0 and that they're color by layer. And you're going to notice if I grab these, you'll notice that they're obviously drawn by somebody who did not know how to do that. They put them on the electrical layer, but at least it's color by layer, so at least I know what layer to deal with. A lot of times what I wind up finding is somebody has overridden the color of a particular object inside the block editor. So even if I've got it on a particular layer, it may not plot properly. Alternatively, let me undo that because I hate that. Alternatively, this block right here, when I drew it up, was drawn on the electrical layer. What that means is that if I grab this block and I put it on any other layer, it won't change. And the problem is that if I put it on a layer that's got a really close color, I may not see that the color didn't change. This color is color 130, and the other color is color 5. So the first thing to always look at with blocks, go into the block editor, make sure that the objects are layer 0, and if they're not, the color of the layer that is their parent is the one that's going to override anything else that you're trying to do. And then also color by layer. That's the first thing. Next question.
And Mary Beth, we're not cutting out, we're just fading into the past.
Yeah.
So, all right, James thanks you for the MSLT scale. He really appreciates that one. Let's see here. Steve's got a question. We have 2 CAD stations and printers on Office Network. I set up a save plot style on one station. The other station can't plot using the same style. Is that a Windows printer issue or what?
And for that one, I'd have to ask, it sounds to me like you're talking PC3s, not plot styles. When we're talking plot styles, we're talking these color tables. These are device independent. So regardless of what device you're sending it to, these plot styles should work. So if I choose a monochrome plot style and I assign it, it doesn't matter what device I'm actually sending it to. So if you're having an issue where, yes, you do know what you're talking about, and you do mean plot styles, and something's not right, that's when we're going to need to do a little bit of tech support and find out what's going on, because these are device independent. Doesn't matter what device I send it to, this drawing is going to come out black and white. Now, if it's these guys that you're talking about with the PC3s, those are really, really tricky. When you build a PC3 or a plot or a configuration for a particular device, and you can't use a PC3 on somebody else's computer, it could be that they don't have the same drivers on their computer. Or here's another one, which is really, really goofy. So I go over to my devices and printers, and everybody's got this HP LaserJet 4000, and how come I can't just share my PC3? Well, it's because when the IT manager installed this driver on my computer, this is what he called it. And on John's computer, he just typed in the word 4000. So all of a sudden, my AutoCAD PC3s aren't working. So not only does the device have to be the same, the driver has to be the same, the driver version has to be the same, and the silly name that you put inside of Windows all has to be the same in order for those PC3s to work on a computer-by-computer basis.
Okay, Mike, I see your question here. I'm going to bring that up last. Jay asks, Warren, this is kind of Civil 3D related. Why do Civil 3D points text size change from MS to PS?
From model space to paper space?
Yep.
You're scaling. Your text size will change depending on, when I'm in model space, I have set what I think, if I'm going to print, and you all know that you can print out a model space for a check print, right? So I have specified right here what I think I'm going to be printing out at. But I come into paper space, and now I go to set up a viewport, and I'm at a completely different scale factor. Scale factors have to be exactly the same inside the viewport as they are inside a model space, and then the text is going to print exactly the same.
Hey, Daniel, on your unrelated question there, I'll remind Warren to take a look at it. You might want to send that over to tech.support@cad-1.com, and somebody will get back with you on this. Lastly, Mike asks, where can I access the recording for this webinar? All of our webinars are available on our website. You go to our website and you find the webinars on the pull down, and at the very top of that webinars page, excuse me, you will see a archived webinars link at the very top of the page. It's taking a little while to kick in here, right up there.
See our webinar archives.
And if you click on that, it will give you a list of the archived webinars, and if you click on that, it will take you to the YouTube page where our webinars are stored. Alternatively, you can go to our CAD-1 YouTube page and
directly do a search right at our CAD-1 YouTube page. So go up to YouTube, do a search for CAD-1 videos, and you can do a search there. Any recorded webinar, and this one is being recorded, any recorded webinar usually takes a few days before it gets up to our webinar page, and we get it in there. We do have several webinars that are not, as I take a look in here, that are not recorded for very good reasons. Things like Civil Chat and Revit Radio and the AutoCAD Answers. These are not recorded because we never know what's going to happen, and we're pretty irreverent. If you've joined us on one of those, this is those are definitely pretty fun and irreverent. But a lot of the questions that you all have had coming in here, some of them have to do with plotting, and a couple may not. AutoCAD Answers is definitely a great webinar to come into. It's like Car Talk. We host a webinar, and then we don't really talk all that much unless you ask questions. So
that's right.
It's all questions and answers, and you can ask questions about anything that has to do with AutoCAD. And then for Revit, you've got Revit Radio that does the same thing, and for those of you with Civil 3D, you've got Civil Chat. So if you've got any kind of question, then show up at one of these webinars and ask your questions.
Get them answered.
One of the things that we always say is that Car Talk without the Boston accent. I like that, Jeff. I can talk with a Boston accent. I'll hurt myself, but I can talk. I got to park my car. But one of the things that we tell people on those webinars is we will answer every one of your questions that you have, regardless of the question that you have. Of course, just as long as you understand that the words "I don't know" is a valid answer.
That's right. And let's see. We got one more. How many consultants?
5 seconds.
How many consultants are using STBs these days?
Not many, but there are some big ones, and I'm not going to drop any names. Tetra Tech that are using STBs, and they're using them successfully. So it was a great idea when it came out and didn't really take off. But the ones that are using it very, very successfully. As long as your users get out of that whole color mindset kind of thing.
And folks, that's about it for our time today. We will see you in the funny pages, and if you need anything else, give us a shout.
Don't forget that CAD-1 is on Facebook and Twitter, and there's all of our information. You can follow us, and don't forget we've got training. We've got one thing I want to do a quick plug about right now is we have online training coming soon. Online being live training hosted online so that you don't have to leave your office and we don't have to come out to yours. You don't even need the software. Install it on a computer. We've got the